Hello to all of my compounding pharmacy friends and colleagues. My name is Bryan Prince. I'm a compounding workflow and lab design consultant, and I specialize in USP 800 compliant environments. I don't do a lot of social media, but recently there was a question that popped up on one of the compounding pharmacy Facebook groups, and it said something like this. My consultant said that I had to have a separate ante room before going into my 800 hazardous non-sterile compounding room, and the answer is no, you do not. Now, if it's an 800 sterile buffer, the answer is yes, you have to have a legitimate ante room, right? But we're talking about a non-sterile. And nowhere in that chapter does it say you have to have a separate ante room. And first of all, we need to get away from that kind of clean room type language. If you do have a separate room, and it is a good practice, that's called a gowning room, or you could call it whatever you want to call it. And it does serve a couple of good purposes, but it is not required. One of the good purposes that the gowning room does show technicians that there's a specific place for donning and doffing. Donning happens in that designated space, and doffing happens inside of the hazardous drug room, because you would never take a potentially soiled gown or garb outside of the negative pressure room and introduce them to the rest of the facility. So really that separate room, not called an ante room, called a gowning room or whatever you want to call it, would be a separate space for gowning only. The other advantage is that it also provides as a pressure break or a reference space for your room pressure sensor monitor. If you've got a reference space as a dynamic hallway where people are walking up and down the hospital and you're trying to reference that to the negative pressure inside of the hazardous drug room, there can be issues with that room pressure sensor monitor kind of jumping around a little bit. So the gowning room does serve a purpose in that it gives more of a stable reference point. But again, let's just kind of go back to the original question on the social media group. You are not required to have a separate ante room or gowning room or separate room prior to introducing yourself into the 800 non-sterile hazardous drug room. If you have any questions about this, feel free to email me. My email is brian@compoundingworkflow.com, or you can certainly give me a call at 228-239-6842.